HB Next is the pioneer of compliance as a service, consolidating how industrial companies manage risk and compliance within their organizations, protecting more than 1 million lives, servicing over 5,000 clients, and bringing over 500 years of safety and business continuity domain expertise for our clients. Built as a comprehensive solution, Sequence XT combines people, technology, and processes to create a robust firewall of protection for owners and stakeholders in an easy-to-use platform. Sequence XT and HB Next is your trusted partner in compliance, risk management, safety, and business continuity. HB Next.
Hello, drivers of getting things done safely and keep your organization running smoothly. Welcome to the Drive podcast, where we navigate topics that matter to you and the lives of professional transportation, DOT, and fleet. Together, let's navigate the roads that keep you safe and compliant, and your business is growing for the future. We're excited to share our 5th episode, Navigating Soaring Insurance Costs in the Commercial Fleet, featuring our special guest, Mike Royal of Partners Risk Services. Mike Royal started his career in the insurance industry in 1995 and has been a certified insurance counselor and certified workers' compensation advisor for over 20 years. Royal founded Partners Risk Services in 2012, which has grown to be one of the largest independent insurance risk management firms in the Southeast. Mike is very active in the insurance industry and is frequently working on legislative issues in the state and federal level. And as always, there's an interactive session, so please add your questions in our chat. We will answer them in the Q&A session at the end. And here's your host, Kevin Colton. And don't forget, all their emails are pinned in the comments in the chat, okay? So here we go. Here's Kevin Colton.
All right. Thanks, Garrett. I appreciate it. And Mike Royal, it's a pleasure to have you on here. So last month, we spoke about the power of telematics, data, and decision-making in coaching. And today, what I want to touch on is we're going to show the integration on how telematics can help proactively help control your insurance costs. It's just one of those little pieces of it, which is the topic today is navigating the soaring insurance costs. All right, so let's get into this episode. And Mike, I appreciate you coming and joining us. I know we've had a very busy time right now with everything in the storm and you're jam-packed. Thanks for joining us. So I've asked you to join us and kind of help us educate us on in-depth understanding of the insurance industry and how companies can proactively protect their commercial fleet from what we hear, the soaring insurance costs that is happening all the time. So let's get into this. So here's our topics that we're going to talk about today. There's kind of 4 areas I want to touch base with you and really for us to get a better understanding from the insurance point of view on what those are. So the first one I want to talk about is going to be the rising cost of insurance. Everybody understands that from your personal to your business. Then we'll kind of get into the types of coverages and why do I need this type of coverage, for my business. And then we know the costs are there. We know the coverage I need, but how can I control that in the strategies involved in that? Kind of give us a little insight on how as a company we can better prepare ourselves. And then really prepping for each year when our renewals come up, what can we do? I want to know from you, from that side of the fence, what can we do as a company to prepare for us on when you send our renewal to the underwriters, is what I understand, and control these costs. So anyways, let's get right into this. And Mike, what I want to ask you is, I know Garrett gave your bio. It's very impressive. I've known you in the industry. I've also known you as a friend, but tell me a little bit about your background in the insurance industry.
Kevin, it's great to be with you, and thanks for having me today. As you mentioned, I literally started right out of college in this industry, started in commercial insurance in 1995. I've been an insurance counselor, certified work comp advisor, but I've done the business soup to nuts. I have worked legislatively in the business. I've chaired government affairs for Georgia's PACs. But I work a lot in construction, in the construction industry. I work with attorneys and help prep them on construction defect. I help with captives. I help with building captives and analyzing coverages and forms.
Right.
And I've spent really the majority of my career working with commercial clients and real heavily in the construction industry to try to help them navigate where we're at today.
Wow. Okay. And I do just want to make a quick note to our listeners that Mike is based out of the Georgia area, Georgia market, Atlanta, but we'll get into that a little bit more. Okay. So, in your opinion, what has been the biggest change in the field, would you say, over the years? And this is kind of a two-part. So,
Mhm.
what's the biggest change you've seen in the field over the years? And in your opinion, why is that? Why have we've had these changes?
Okay. The market has evolved a lot, even in the last 2 years, and I'll say even in the last 6 months. It's changed a lot and
Right.
since I've been in it since 1995. But we are in the midst of the hardest market that I've ever seen, and it's not just hard. You have certain lines and segments that will be harder to obtain or get more expensive over time, which it really
Right.
started with automobile, particularly in Georgia. States are different. We operate all over the Southeast. We're licensed in about 40 states, at
Okay.
least. But so you've got some of your Midwestern states that are going to be way less expensive than auto than Georgia. But the hard market's just not an automobile. The hard market has filtered into premises liability for legal issues. It's really gotten hard in umbrella excess liability. And even lately, even in Georgia, not just Florida or the coastal areas, property. And the events of this
Okay.
past week are going to dramatically affect that even worse. But the hard market has really changed things. The use of analytics by underwriters and companies have really changed the way companies are underwritten and accounts are underwritten. The entire market has dramatically changed, even in the last 2 years.
But just to kind of touch on it, in your opinion, why do you think that?
Okay, there's a lot that goes into it. I mean, severe weather. I mean, when you're looking at auto, you're not just talking about accidents. I know the TV's been full of vehicles floating down the road, and that's not
Oh,
even just in South Georgia and Florida. That's in Atlanta. So severe weather, hail damage. Hail is a huge impact on cars and automobiles sitting out in the open. So severe weather really affects it, I think, a lot more than people realize. The high rates of traffic accidents, where the Atlanta area, you've got a very high rate of traffic. Anybody in the Atlanta area, if you're driving in, you hear the red reports. Don't go here. This traffic accident. Uninsured drivers play a cost in that. The cost to repair vehicles has skyrocketed. What we call just the fender bender claims, meaning no bodily injury, nothing, no one was hurt. Hey, we're exchanging. I bumped into you in the parking lot. It was my fault. You exchanged the car. That used to be a couple $1,000s. Now I'm shocked if it's under 10 grand. And if you're talking about some of the vehicles like a Tesla or anything like that, it's 20 grand or more. So those costs have gone up. The rising medical costs for accidents, but in Georgia particularly, and Florida has addressed this, the high litigation costs. Litigation costs have skyrocketed. I saw a report not long ago. I don't remember the numbers right off the top of my head, but someone did a study around 285 in Atlanta, looked at every billboard from 285, and over 80% of the billboards were attorneys. And what you see, even my Atlanta Braves going to be cheering them on tonight, but one of their main sponsors is a trial attorney for accidents. So they are out there advertising. They're out there fighting for all the work they can get. And those litigation costs, though, have skyrocketed. And Georgia particularly has been listed as the #1 judicial hellhole for I think it's now 4 years running, where the costs of litigation have just gotten so high. And then we'll address some of that a little bit later. But no, it's not just one thing, and the weather really plays a bigger factor than I think people understand.
Gotcha. Let me ask you this: do you think companies at fault for the cost of the rising cost of the rates?
You can ask some of our insureds when they get done with an accident, and they'll say the company fell over too easy and paid too much money. They should have fought harder in there. But it's an all hands on deck. I mean, I just mentioned 5 things that affect insurance rates. I think you really have to look at, are the companies at fault or are individuals? Is it a macro or micro issue? We've got, in the big scheme of things, the things we just mentioned. Companies, I think, right now are more in charge of their own destiny of what they're paying compared to their peers. Everyone's going up, everyone. But in their business segment, how much are they paying compared to their peers? And like situations, like business segments, companies, I think, more, and we'll get into that here in a minute, but I think have more control over their own destiny than they used to, because of what underwriters are doing to really underwrite accounts and what's going into it. There's really almost creating 2 separate underwriting classes: the general population and the ones that are doing everything right.
And I know you agree with me on this, and we'll talk a little bit more. And I've talked about this in past discussions, but there's a lot of little things that companies should have in place to help them not only be successful in their business, but to help them on their cost. And in the event an incident happens and it comes up with insurance. So we'll get into that a little bit more here as we talk in some of these sections. But that's kind of my understanding on why the rates were going up and everything. I mean, cars, everything. So, all right. Let's discuss how much coverage should I have to protect my company, and why? What is the standard? I know there's fleet and there's commercial, but how much coverage should I have to protect my company?
We get that question a lot, and I say, if you give me a crystal ball, I'll be able to tell you exactly how much you need and when. But it doesn't work that way. That's a very broad question, and the true answer is it depends. I won't dodge your question and just say it depends. But are you a big company with a lot of assets with 100 trucks on the road, or are you a mom and pop HVAC contractor with 5 trucks on the road?
Right.
In my opinion, every commercial risk on auto needs to have $1 million worth of primary coverage and an umbrella. We don't even offer a quote out of our office without that. Now, how high of an umbrella depends on your risk profile, and that. I mean, we have companies that have $50 million umbrellas and more, all the way down to, like you say, some mom and pop companies that have 5 million, 3 million, 1 million umbrellas. That's where you really need to engage an insurance professional and have that discussion and get them to know your business and know what your risk profile is to be able to really truly answer that question. But at minimum, an umbrella.
I got it. And just real quick, if you can sum this up, because I'm kind of playing the guy that doesn't know what some of these things are that you're saying. Explain to me, what is an umbrella?
Okay.
You told me I need $1 million, but then an umbrella. What does the umbrella mean?
Okay.
And what is that, real quick?
No, awesome. You've got your underlying coverages, your general liability, your commercial auto liability, your workers' compensation, and an umbrella is just that. It's a coverage that sits on top of all those and covers. It's excess coverage over those. So if you've got a $1 million liability policy and a $1 million automobile policy and a $5 million umbrella, you now have 6 for each of those lines of coverage.
Gotcha. Okay. Perfect. So then that brings me to this, because I'm looking, and I know a lot of our listeners, it's about saving money. So I have insurance for my fleet, And obviously, I have to have workman's comp insurance because of my employees and everything that's going like that. Does it make sense that I should bundle these? And do I get a discount if I come to you and say, hey, I got 20 vehicles I need to put under my fleet insurance, but I also got to have workman's comp? Can I put that in a bundle? And what does my coverage look like? Do I get a discount? Is it make more sense to do that? What do you think?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question because we're getting that more and more now, because the answer is usually not when you're talking about workers' compensation versus other lines, because a lot of times we'll see the liability insurance, the commercial general liability, the property, the auto with one carrier. And then we have some really good specialty underwriters that do a really good business just in workers' compensation. And we use those a lot because they specialize in niches. They're better at turning around claims than the other. But here's what we're seeing right now. And we're seeing this more and more and more because workers' compensation is a much more profitable line in general to insurers than commercial auto. I don't know many or if really any carriers in Georgia or even the Southeast really that are making money on auto. So they're starting to leverage the workers' compensation with the other lines where we'll get a quote in and the carrier will say, here's the work comp, here's the auto, property, and it's one. You remove the work comp, we won't write the other, or the price goes up on the other. They're what we call leveraging the other lines for the workers' comp, which doesn't really work out the best all the time. But generally the answer is no. You don't have to bundle your workers' compensation with the other lines.
Perfect. So let me ask you this, and let's start getting into a little bit about my employees driving vehicles and that. So can another person or a company actually sue one of my employees if they're involved in an at fault while driving my company vehicle? Can that employee or that driver, can he be sued and held responsible a little bit? And I kind of have a follow-up question after this, but
I would
what have
say
you
not can he or she be, but they will be. It would probably actually be malpractice on the attorney if they didn't sue the employee driving the car as well and name them in the lawsuit. Here's what we do. We see these lawsuits all the time. They come across my desk all the time. They're always naming the individual that was at fault in the accident or ticketed and the owner of the vehicle in there. Generally, the attorneys are trying to get to the owner of the vehicle, the quote unquote deep pockets. That's what they're trying to get to, unless you've got obviously a doctor's practice and he was the owner of the vehicle, then they're looking at it in there. But the answer is absolutely not can they. They will be named. However, the good news for the driver of the vehicle is unless they're excluded or there's some other provision in the policy that doesn't cover for them, in general, anyone you give permission, including employees or your wife or whoever, to drive the vehicle, they're covered while they're driving that vehicle. They are an additional or an insured while they're driving that vehicle.
Okay. So here's something I get a lot, and you're seeing it more and more because companies kind of roll in their compensation to an employee by giving them a take-home vehicle. They drive the Ford F-250 all day long for their work site, but now they're allowed to drive that vehicle home. That's kind of their compensation because they're not having to pay for their own gas, wear and tear type thing. So if I allow my employee to take his company vehicle home and he's off duty and he's done with the job site, he's 2 miles from home and he's involved in an accident, and this is kind of two parts, but he's involved in an accident and he's injured, can they claim workman's comp on that? And how is it still liable back on me as the company? Because he's not on the clock, he's not working for me, but he's driving my truck.
Kevin, this is one I'd like to spend a little bit more time on because I think there's a lot of misconceptions among business owners and frankly even agencies on where the liability ends and stops, because you've really got two separate issues here: workers' compensation and then liability for their use of the vehicle.
Right.
From the workers' compensation side, the scenario you described, the employee was on his way home from the work site. So if that employee is entrusted with that company vehicle and they drive it to the work site and then home, quite possibly and quite likely on the way home, even though they're off the clock, that would be a compensable workers' compensation injury, because they use that job site as they're not headed to an office and then go to a job site and then go to an office and clock out and then come home. When they're using that, they're on the clock. Also, though, here's where we're seeing a lot of some of the biggest claims I've seen in uninsured motorist claims. You've got a clerical employee in the office. Your office manager is running to the bank to do a deposit in their personal vehicle. Boom, they're in an accident. In discovery, they're going to try to tie that into the scope of their employment, and they will. I've seen a major 6 or 7 figure judgment against the company on that very issue. But then, so the answer is on workers, and that's workers' compensation. So that employee is injured, taking that deposit to the bank, that's workers' comp and hired and non-owned liability if they're in their own vehicle. If they're coming to and from a job site, reporting to and from a job site, it's the high likelihood that could be a compensable workers' compensation injury. Now let's shift gears to the weekend. All right. The worst claim I've ever personally dealt with, and this isn't one I read about in a book, this is one of my clients, was a weekend claim. Okay. Exact scenario. F-150, not F-250. Guy had his F-150 home Saturday. Grandma needs a new mailbox post. Well, he goes to Applebee's for lunch, chugs down a few beers. Uh-oh. And Friday night, he may have had a little fun with an illegal substance that he smoked.
Oh, geez.
So he goes to Applebee's and has some beers. He's headed to Home Depot to pick up the supplies to fix Grandma's mailbox post. A horrific accident, fatality, other significant long-term injuries. The most expensive and most horrific accident I've ever been involved in and had to deal with. 100% liability on that company. They were absolutely liable.
Wow.
So the question is yes, and most likely yes. Now take that from a workers' compensation standpoint. Did that employee that was injured in that lawsuit on that Saturday, were they entitled to workers' comp? No. They were Saturday. They were not. The big thing on workers' compensation and liability on both of them, were they in the course and scope of their employment?
Got it.
Particularly workers' compensation.
So. I see there's really kind of a fine line in that whole thing. So let me ask you this. I employ somebody, and in the scope of their job, they have to use their vehicle, let's say, to go out to do site inspections, but they are driving their personal car. And it falls under their personal vehicle insurance. Just kind of real quick, can I kind of tell them they need to have the max limits or higher than the state requirement?
You can, if they're doing that, and that can be part of there are some policies and procedures, and a lot more companies are putting policies and procedures wrapped around that. And that's a discussion you need to have, where you have at least a $300,000 minimum or that to have this position and use your car. You have to do that, because here's a misunderstanding too, that the company, they're in their personal vehicle, so I'm not liable. That is not true. Although the personal vehicles insurance is primary, but if you're looking at $1 million lawsuit and they've got $300,000, that's a $700,000 gap. However, also though, a lot of primary or personal lines insurance companies are putting exclusions for work-related accidents in those policies. If you're with, I'm trying to pick on anybody particular, but if you're with the general, there's not going to be any coverage for the company, or some of the other carriers, they're not going to cover anything business related.
Got it. Let me ask you this, and this just kind of sum it up. You don't have to go into detail, but are there, these rising costs and these lawsuits and everything that's going on, are there any laws or regulations that are actually being looked at to kind of help slow down some of these costs or put a control on it, because we're seeing such a spike on it? Is there just anything that you've heard of?
Oh, absolutely. As you mentioned, I'm very involved legislatively. I'm involved in the government affairs, and we're already working with the governor's office and some other legislators for this year for Georgia. And Florida did a great job on this a couple of years ago and is seeing some good results on some legislation wrapped around the high litigation costs. I won't get into specifics, like looking at capping or limiting what's called phantom damages, looking at other things that we can do legislatively to help do really what Florida and some other states have done here, to do that here in Georgia. There's a concerted effort among our group, the NFIB, the chambers, even the Bankers Association getting involved. So there's a real concerted effort this year to try to push something across legislatively.
Got it. Perfect. Well, at least somebody's doing something about it. All right. So let's move into our third topic. And that is kind of, the topic is strategies. So we hear about these rising costs and everything, but what can I do as, the strategies to control your insurance costs? So the bottom line is costs continue to go up. I need to tighten the ship. I need to help control some of these costs. I talked and I help, that's kind of what I do with my unit in HB Next is I help advise, companies on, writing updated policies and putting all these safety measures in place.
Mhm.
But what can a company do to help control some of these costs that would help them on the insurance, like knowing your insurance company, telematics, that type of thing? Can you kind of explain that to me on that? What can they do?
Absolutely. If you are waiting till 60, 90, 30 days out to really start looking at your insurance costs, I'm just being blunt, you're screwed. You've got to control this process. You've got to be involved in this process. And you've got to be, you mentioned it in the opening remarks, proactive. There are things you need to be doing throughout the year. I'll start and I'll back up. For instance, I had a discussion with one of my clients yesterday, has a large fleet and they've had some activity. They renew in April. We are pulling their losses right now and reviewing it and going over with the carriers where they're at and trying to see what we can get closed out, what we can get written down, getting the status, letting them know to try to help the insurance adjusters do their job so it helps us. Because loss ratios are one of the biggest factors that are going to be impacting your premium. Loss ratios is one. Number two is making your submission that we give to the insurance company be a top of the stack submission. One where the insurance underwriter that's going to be pricing your account has to be objective and subjective. They're looking at your loss ratio, your business type category and all that. And you can't do anything about your business category in that time. But what are you doing to be a top of the stack submission to tell that underwriter and those people at the insurance company to where you are a better risk than the others in your market segment? Use the telematics where you have controls in place over your drivers. You know what's going on in your vehicles. You're monitoring what's going on in your vehicles. And then you're doing something about it, i.e. HB Next and the program you have to monitor the data that's coming into the telematics. Because actually telematics has become a double-edged sword. If you have it and you're not doing anything with the data, the lawyers are going to use that even to hammer you even harder. It's not, it's not Mike. You should have had more control over your employee. You knew better and you didn't do anything about it. So, but using telematics and doing something with the data, measuring the data and doing that is huge on there.
Right.
The other parts of it, just related to auto are, what are you doing? Are you allowing them to take them home on the weekends? Well, if you're using telematics in HB Next, you can know if they're running to Applebee's or the liquor store or whatever with their vehicles. But really coming up with a process and working with an insurance professional year round to manage a process and have a plan in place to where when you're 90 days out, we are putting together a summary for your insurance renewal and going out to shop it to where your submission is on top of the stack and you're beginning to have companies fight for you versus right now it's not. One of the biggest changes in the market, to loop back to that, is It used to be we could get almost anything done. It was how much does it cost? Now capacity in the market is a constraint. And now we're actually sitting there, can we even get you insured? That's the discussion we're having now. And if you're using, and some of the companies are really, really looking hard at telematics and loss control safety companies like HB Next. If you're doing the two, they're gonna give you better pricing. And some are even on higher, like bigger trucks, heavier trucks are requiring, if you don't have telematics, they will not write your insurance.
Gotcha. All right. And just kind of to recap this section, it's just not telematics. I talked about telematics my last 2 episodes, but it's doing a good onboarding process, running MVRs, having a well-written company driver policy, having telematics that you actually monitor, or a company, a third-party safety to help you with that. And all those things are in. So great. All right.
Let me just jump in and recap a little bit right there, Kevin, because I want to say something on that, because you just mentioned a lot of great things. And what I see is when someone gets sued that normally has their first time in a big lawsuit, they are scared to death when they get that packet from the opposing attorney and they're asking for discovery. They are asking for everything you just asked on that driver. Their application. Did you do a test drive with that company and do that? And so every bit of that is being asked, and every bit of that's going to be presented to the jury. But I'm telling you what that attorney's doing. They're looking at the companies that can provide that and show that they're doing everything that's reasonable, and they're even going above and beyond. And they're walking away for that case or trying to settle that case. When they get a big fatality, it's a big pocket or a big claim, and you can't answer those questions that you just answered, you don't have their driver safety manual, you don't have their training, you don't have their MVR, you don't have any of that, they're seeing big dollars.
Yeah. And this is going to kind of tie in, a little bit my last section here. But yes, I have been part of that on the law enforcement side in the depositions and on trials and that, where the companies are just sitting there with their chin down. So our last topic is how can my company, and how can I tell our listeners, if you're a CFO, how can a company better prepare in advance for the yearly insurance renewal? And I think we just touched base on some of it. But as an owner, a CFO, vice president, or a person that has an active part in a company's insurance process, and that can be many people depending on the size of your company. It can be people from HR, people from safety, people from the mechanic. So in that process, what can they be doing when it comes to renewing your policy? And I know you already touched base that, hey, you don't be coming to us 30 to 60 days out. What's this process look like? What do they need to be doing?
Well, you just said the renewal. You just said the renewal process, and we did touch on this, so I'll just summarize it a little bit. The renewal process starts the day after you just renewed for the next year.
Wow.
It really does. And if you are managing that and engaging professionals, i.e. a professional agent and a professional company to help manage that process, because I can't say the process enough, and the process built on something that works. So we know, Kevin, you and your company know, I know, like I say, we've worked together on this and helped a lot of people over the years do a lot better. So if you are engaging professionals, not just an agent that's going to look, what I call look, copy, quote, pray. Let me look at what you got, make a copy of it, give you a quote, and pray we got the lowest price, and we'll do it again next year. That is out the window.
Yeah. And one of the things that I really like about working with you and your team is, you guys are an active part of that. So I would think there are things that we can do all year long, just like you said. But what about the 90 or 180 days out? What if I've implemented something new within this last year? Is that important for me to tell my agent that, hey, I have now partnered up with somebody such as myself in HB Next, where we have rewritten our driver policy. We have HB Next is helping us in an active part of our telematics. We have safety classes. We have accident reviews. What are these things that 90, 180 days out that I can be preparing? And do you guys help me do that before it all goes to the underwriters and we see what my new bill is for next year.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you asked that, because here's a question I'd love for some of our viewers out there to ask their agent. Show me a copy of the submission, or walk me through your process of how you're marketing my account. And if you go, well, we send it, we got a marketing department, they send it to 30 different carriers. Do they have a summary of what you're doing? Is there a narrative of your company and what you've done? Is there any of that in that submission process? Are you including cover letters with your submission? You've got to have talks like that to be engaged with your agent and ask the question, what are you doing? Give me a copy of what you've submitted to the carriers and ask that. And you'll find out real quick if you get the or if you get the, you know what, that's great, because I literally just had one of them write a narrative that's had some issues in it, but we wrote a narrative up. I had him write the narrative of what they've done to improve themselves and make them a better risk to the insurance marketplace.
And this is something that we have more actively been doing. And as you know, because I've worked with some of your guys on your team and, clients that we help, that, they will come to me and say, hey, Kevin, can you help put together this summary of what company ABC is doing now that they weren't doing last year? And I'm like, absolutely. We have a new policy that is in place. We're holding quarterly driver meeting. We have all the DQ files and company records are in an iCloud base where we can provide them at a drop of a notice. So in the event that we go to a deposition and people are asking, I have that stuff. So all that stuff is really in there. And I think you would agree on this that, companies owe it to themselves that they need to know who their insurance company is. And there's insurance companies out there that I know, and the only time you hear from them is when it's time for renewal. I really think they need to play an active part. And if they're afraid of how that works or how do I write this up, I feel that I'm learning more and more every time that I do this and sit down and put these outlines together for the company and present it to you guys, and it's really helping them. And just kind of closing that out, I think you would agree in that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Perfect.
It's a process.
It's great. There's a lot of work, and I never heard that your renewal process starts the day after you sign your contract. Wow, I never looked at it that way. That's big. All right. I appreciate we've got a lot of information so far. And kind of in closing, so let's kind of recap quickly what we've discussed today. So our 4 topics, rising cost of insurance. We know, at least right now, the costs are going to continue to go up. We're not seeing anybody saying, "Hey, your policy is cheaper than it was last year." Correct?
Actually, after the events of last week and what we've got brewing, I'm worried about it even accelerating.
I know. And then a little bit is the coverage, the amount of coverage you need. And we talked about the amount of coverage that your company needs and why. You educated me a little bit more, and I'm sure some of my listeners about the umbrella. The larger I am, I need to protect me a little bit more than the mom and pop. And then here's the big one is controlling the insurance strategies. I think that's the biggest section that you really explained to me, talking about whether we have a company vehicle or my employee drives their own personal vehicle for driving home. We know that they can be sued just as much as I can be sued. Having the right type of coverage, what that looks like. That's huge. The next one in the last section that we just talked about is prepping for the yearly renewal. You couldn't have said it any better. Is your renewal starts the day after you sign the contract, and it's putting together, having your policies updated for your employees, making sure you're doing the proper onboarding process for new employees, continuing education on our drivers and employees, having a good maintenance program. We didn't mention that, but having a good maintenance program that drivers are looking at their vehicles and we're fixing them when they're told, because we don't want to put something unsafe out there on the road. A lot of that. And in closing, I really want to thank you here today. I was worried because in light of the recent storms and everything, I know you've probably been going gangbusters with claims and everything. I appreciate you pulling time out and preparing for the show and meeting with me today, and for being here on The Drive. Mike, it's definitely, you've educated me on the insurance industry, and I know we've only scratched the surface. I have a little bit better understanding from my point of view, and that's definitely something that I want my clients to understand, that you're paying out all this money on insurance because it's required, but you got to know your insurance company, you got to know your agent, and you got to be prepared on all this.
Yeah.
You owe it to yourself. If not, you're just throwing this money away. Make sure you have a well-versed company, a company that cares.
Yeah.
That's how I can say it, is you really care. So in closing, Garrett, and now we're listening to you, Garrett. I'm going to turn it back on to you. What do you have from our listeners? Does anybody send any questions in for us that we can try to answer on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm back. Garrett's back from behind the camera. So we're actually have some pre-submitted questions that have already came in from our form. So we really want to thank our viewers for pre-submitting questions. I also want to open it up now as well. Please feel free to submit any live questions you have in the chat. I will happily go over them. So just want to make sure that's out there. We do have a two-part question. For our first one, what if I give employees a car allowance or reimburse them per mile and make them drive their own car? That's the first part of the question. The second part is, can I still be sued?
Thank you, because that's a great question, because that takes what we just discussed one step further. And the answer is, again, absolutely you can and you will be. Because what it drops down, where it really comes down to is that driver in the course and scope of their employment? And if that answer is yes, you just created liability for the company that is employing them through what we refer to as a hired and non-owned automobile liability. And that's where it would be covered under hired and non-owned, i.e. the non-owned, or hired. If you hire somebody else to drive for you, you can still become liable for what they do. And we're seeing a lot more of that because of the rising costs. Some companies are ditching their company-owned auto, and just saying, I'm going to give them a $500 a month or so whatever car allowance. And they do. One of the largest claims I've been involved with from that situation was that it was somebody using their own car on the weekend. It was actually a Saturday, but it was a box company. The salesman was taking some boxes to a client on a Saturday and was involved in a bad accident, and he was on a car allowance. Absolutely. The company became liable.
Wow. Good question.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike, for the question and the answer. The second question we have is, what if they are using their company car on their personal time or on the weekend? Their personal insurance will cover it, right?
We talked about this just briefly again, but I think it's worth diving into a little further. Thank you. Is the scenario like we mentioned in there? You've got whether it's a personal vehicle and they're using it in the course and scope of their employment, delivering something, going to see a customer, going to play golf with a customer. I've seen that pulled in. It was a Saturday, but they were going to play golf with a customer, so the business was tied into it. But that's where the coverage on the vehicle becomes primary. If there's not an exclusion saying there's no vehicle use covered, that vehicle becomes primary, meaning if you reach out and tap remember our risk management class, if you reach out and tap the hood at the top of the car, that's whose insurance is primary. But what we're seeing a lot of times, though, and more with the higher litigation costs, is they don't have enough coverage in there to cover that bad accident, and the company is going to end up being, because the attorneys are after the deep pockets.
Got it. Wow.
Thank you again, Mike.
Good question.
Really appreciate that, Mike. The third question we have, I like all of the insurance stuff, but how can HB Next help my company with insurance?
I can answer that. Good question. And here's the thing. In what my team does and what HB Next does is help educate, maintain a company on the safety driving side. There's a lot of things that a company, and we've talked about this in previous podcasts, and we talked about today. There's not one thing that you do that is going to help you get a better rate from Mike and his team, but it's a course of everything that you do. And that's, again, the onboarding and policies and using telematics and cameras the correct way and training and education and everything. So what can we do is help guide you and work with you on the insurance side. It's really just, I like to say, help educating you guys on the importance part so you can continue to run your business and concentrate on what is important to you.
Yeah.
We're there as that extra reassurance to give you the legal side, to help you, to guide you, and to help you with Mike and his team and engage in that partnership to help maintain and control the cost. Good question.
What you're doing, I'll even take that one step further, is you're helping us tell the story and creating an overall better risk profile. So the person at the insurance company sitting on the other side of the desk that has to say, one, do we even want this risk? And then number two, where are we going to price this risk? You're helping that profile and us tell the story to get the best long-term. None of this is instant gratification. It's not. You've got to look at your long-term cost of risk and your risk profile and what you're doing over time to improve that, to, again, improve your risk profile, make you a top of the stack submission so they want to write your business.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks, Mike.
Awesome. Yes, thank you again, Mike. We have one last pre-submitted question to go over. This question states, so how do I put a road test, MVR, and all of those things into place?
I'll answer that. And again, that's where I talk about, and I'm going to use this nonstop now, Mike, is your renewal starts the day after you sign for this year. And what is that is putting the road tests, MVRs, all these things into place. We can help guide you on whatever level and to point that your company needs to. If you just need to know, hey, what form do I need to use? Do I have to do a road test for a pickup truck? Do I have to run an MVR, and how often? All these things, all those things are better, I would say, are an individual, and I can answer a lot clearer on a case-by-case basis. And if somebody reaches out to me or reaches out to Mike, and you'll give them our contact, we can help. But yes, I can help you with that. I can help you. Why do you need a road test if he comes in with a CDL? Isn't he supposed to know how to do that? But there's things that I have seen and Mike has seen and his team has seen in depositions and lawsuits. What do we want to do? We just want to be prepared. So, we can help you with all those things. Mike can help you with all those things. And I think the biggest thing, and I'll close this out, is where we didn't see this before, but I think, Mike, you would agree with me, is that we're now all starting to work together. HB Next, or my safety team, is working with the insurance and working with the client, and we're all coming together because I want to keep you safe and compliant. You want to keep them with the insurance, and you want to have the best rate. We're all working together. And a lot of times we've never seen that in the past. And I think that's really where this is going. Just real quick, would you agree on that, Mike? Or because people like us never work together. Hey, insurance, you sign here. If not, no big deal.
Correct. We were in silos for so long. And now, again, it's building that risk profile and that partnership. All hands on deck. It's got to be.
Perfect. All right. Thanks. I hope that answers everything. What else you got, Garrett?
Well, First off, thank you, Kevin, for answering that question. And that does conclude all of this pre-submitted questions and the question and answer session for today. I just want to say thank you for listening, everybody who submitted questions and listened to our question and answer session. I just want to say thank you. Kevin and Mike Royal are available to follow up with questions after the podcast. You can reach Kevin at kcolton@hbnext.com and Mike at mroyal@partnersrs.com. His mobile number is 404-401-7185. Again, that's kcolton@hbnext.com and Mike or mroyal@partnersrs.com. And once again, his mobile number is 404-401-7185. That's also a pinned comment in our chat. And I do want to say thank you so much for our lovely chatters today, giving us some nice comments and some good vibes. I really do appreciate that here today. The recorded session and future topics will always be found at hbnext.com/podcast. And you can always be found at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get podcasts. The live stream will also be found on our YouTube channel at HBNext Corp. Our next episode is exploring success stories, conversations with fleet customers, and that'll be on Wednesday, November 13th at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you found today's discussion helpful, please share and subscribe to our YouTube channel at HBNext Corp. Leave us a review. Join our conversation on social media at HBNext using the hashtag TheDRIVE and hashtag HBNextTheDRIVE. And if you have any questions or topics you'd like for us to cover in future episodes, feel free to reach out to us at TheDRIVE@hbnext.com. Until next time, stay safe and keep driving towards a better future. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
HB Next is the pioneer of compliance as a service, consolidating how